Gaze up and welcome to Proper Play. In this episode, we will be talking about Living Story Season 1, The Secrets of Southsun. So, before I hand this over to Proper, I just want to say that this episode has been brought to you by ArenaNet. So, without further ado, let's do this thing.
Welcome guys, and thank you Sif for that lovely introduction. Listen, Sif looking good nowadays, ain't Sif looking good. But anyway, alright, we're gonna kick off this episode of Guild Wars 2 Living Story Season 1. This is The Secret of Southsun. If you remember, in the last episode, Flame and Frost, we dispatched the Molten Alliance who had attacked the Shiver Peaks area and Ashkelon, which had drove the Norn and the Char to be refugees. Those refugees were given deals to go to what seemed to be an island paradise known as Southsun Cove. So, let's break it down for you like this. Let's say that your area that you live in is met with a natural disaster, which would be massive enough to make you a refugee. And let's say FEMA comes to you, hands you a contract and say you could go to the Bahamas, seek refuge. And let's say they have you sign a contract and all that good stuff. Now, let's say you get to the Bahamas. What they end up making you do, I mean, you have to work and things like that, which is all in this contract you signed. What is not told to you is that there's these massive crab animals there that literally is killing people right and left. But that fine print in that contract states you cannot leave the Bahamas no matter what. Well, that's basically what happened in regards to the Consortium dealing with the refugees that moved to Southsun Cove to seek refuge. They believed it was a temporary solution. It was not a temporary solution. It was a solution for the Consortium. Now, what and who is behind this? That's what we tried to break down in this particular episode. Though bound by their contract, most of the new settlers were a little uneasy due to the fact that they were tricked into a legally binding contract to stay on Southsun Cove. Mostly, the Char were the ones that were unraveled. The Norns, for the most part, were able to accept the agreements, though some still were a little uneasy about it as well. Them being forced to stay on the island started to cause a rift between some refugees and the Consortium that hosted them. It was at this point that we received a letter from Inspector Alan Kill, which stated, "Calling all stalwarts. We've got trouble in Southsun Cove again. Tensions between the resettling refugees and their Consortium hosts are about to boil over, and the local wildlife is more aggressive than ever. On Captain Magnus's orders, I'm deputizing any and all qualified volunteers to help keep the peace. If you're up for a challenge and you have the skill, come see me so we can shut down this unrest before it gets unmanageable." Ellen Kill was sent to ease the unrest on Southsun Cove between the Consortium and the new refugees on the island, just because Lion's Arch actually had jurisdiction of Southsun Cove, but the Consortium still owned the island. So because they owned the island, didn't do anything wrong because they had legal contracts with these refugees. The only thing that we could really do at this time was to soften the relationship between the Consortium and the refugees that were stationed on that island. If you remember, in the second episode of this series, there was a little asshole Surin by the name of Subdirector Noel that was assigned to the island by the Consortium to basically sort out issues between the refugees and the Consortium itself. Noel was the definition of Napoleon complex. I mean, the little man felt the need to berate and sometimes violently handle situations between the Consortium and those refugees. Now think about this, the refugees were both Char and Norn. No's a little certain. You can still actually see him if you go to Southsun Cove. But there was issues there, and the Consortium actually ended up assigning No to a project because us as the adventurers in the area and trying to help with the situation, we were actually sent to sabotage those contracts so the refugees could find a way off the island. The Consortium caught wind of this and actually assigned Sub-Director No to grab those contracts and actually take them to a safe location so they would not be vandalized by us, the adventurers. So the Consortium didn't like it because we ended up succeeding somewhat in doing that. So they basically ended up putting him on house arrest of sorts there on the island, not allowing him to leave until he quelled the differences between the refugees and the Consortium. Now, Ellen Kill actually ended up having that same task, but on the refugee side. So somehow we had to get that together to make everything run smoothly on Southsun Cove. Ellen Kill actually ends up having another job on the island. That job being to protect the nobles that just arrived, who were enticed by the Consortium's promise of having a little fun in the sun. Of these nobles, we were introduced to a very familiar face if you've watched any of my Living Story Season 2, 3, Heart of Thorns gameplays. Cashmere Mead was one of those nobles. Lady Mead was actually sent to the island by Marjorie Delacroix to do a little fact-finding for her. Now keep in mind, we got the Consortium, refugees, nobles, Sub-Director No, Ellen Kill, all there, and yet we forgot about the biggest problem of them all, which was the wildlife on Southsun Cove, which was acting uncharacteristically aggressive. Head researcher Levi, who was stationed on the island to investigate the wildlife, actually ended up finding a plant, a flora, with toxin that in his mind he was thinking that it was releasing this toxin into the environment of Southsun Cove, not only causing the wildlife to get riled up, but it may also be affecting the refugees and the Consortium and all occupants on the island. Researcher Levi had seen this type of flora before. It was actually used by Silvari in the past. There was a settler named Henrika who had confessed to kill on her parts in some of the attacks. Being that it was a Silvari in question, the only Silvari that would come to the mind of Kill was the previously escaped Silvari who had something to do with the past issues with the Consortium on Southsun Cove. That Silvari's name? Kanash. Now, I would hate to end this episode the same way I ended the last one that we were on Southsun Cove, but yes, we're still looking into Kanash and what his involvement was in Southsun Cove and the Consortium. So tune in next time for the next episode of Living Story Season 1, Last Stand at Southsun. Until next time, pinkies up, proper out.